Right now, there's something happening in Greece that might be transforming all of Europe's economy. You see, over the last few years, there's been a few projects and a few giant investments that could shift the power of not just Europe, but potentially of the world. And there are a few of these projects, and we're going to start off with the first one here. In early 2025, Chevron, yes, Chevron, the fossil fuel behemoth that's responsible for more oil than your Uncle Tony's hair, has expressed interest in 2 more offshore blocks near the island of Crete. So these aren't just tiny blocks of oil, these aren't just a few dozen kilometers that they're looking for oil. They think there's a potentially giant oil reserve just around the island of Crete. And these new areas double Greece's offshore exploration territory from nearly 23,000 square kilometers to a whopping 47,000 square kilometers. That is, in fact, larger than the entire country of Denmark, which is coincidentally a place where people already have energy. Greece, by contrast, is playing catch up with Poseidon. Now, this isn't just a nice opportunity. This is the kind of energy ambition where the Greek government basically turns to big oil and says, here, take half our sea, and please find that multi-billion-dollar patch of oil. So why is Chevron sniffing around? Well, the same reason billionaires sniff around tax loopholes. There's possibly a gold mine of oil under this part of the sea. Greece's own state-run hydrocarbons agency estimates that the potential gas reserves around the island of Crete and the Ionian Sea may reach 680 billion cubic meters. To contextualize this, Greece only consumes about 5 billion cubic meters of gas per year. So, if these reserves are real, that's over 100 years worth of gas for this country alone, plus enough to export to neighboring countries, and possibly even enough to let the government stop pretending that renting German submarines counts as military modernization. Now, if these reserves exist, and that's a large if, then Greece could join the VIP lounge of energy-producing nations. We're talking energy independence, export revenues, cheaper domestic bills, and something Greece hasn't had since the invention of souvlaki, which is leverage. It could shift the balance of power in southern Europe. A Greece with energy is not the same as a Greece begging for bailouts while Germany touts disapprovingly. Instead of Germany wagging its fiscal finger, it could be Greece wagging the gas pipeline, whispering, "You want heat this winter? Olaf, say opa." Even more enticing, this isn't just Greece's fever dream. American companies like Chevron and ExxonMobil are here, sniffing for hydrocarbons. And when companies that spend more on lobbying than Greece spends on defense get involved, you know it's serious. This is also becoming a geopolitical power move. These new exploration zones deliberately overlap with areas that Turkey and Libya claimed through a controversial maritime agreement in 2019. In other words, Chevron just walked into a decades-long territorial dispute and said, "Hi, we're here for the gas, also the Americans are with us, so good luck." Now, let's slow down here, let's take a deep breath, because if you think this is going to be a smooth sailing project, I've got a rusted ferry boat with broken air conditioning to sell you. The drawbacks, well, they're Olympian in size. So, one is environmental lawsuits. Greece is a part of the EU, which means you can't walk into the ocean without first submitting a 94-page impact assessment and consulting a committee of sea turtles, okay? Environmental groups like Greenpeace and WWF are already prepping legal challenges. Why is this? Because much of the drilling overlaps with Natura 2000 protected zones, home to monk seals, dolphins, and the remaining dignity of EU climate policy. There's also bureaucratic delays because it's Greece. Projects announced in 2018 are just now gearing up for actual drilling, so if Greece ever builds a rocket to Mars, expect the launch to be around, 2085 or so. There's also public backlash because Greeks love their sea. They swim in them, eat from them, and occasionally protest in them. Public support for offshore drilling is lukewarm at best, especially after seeing oil spills in places like the Mauritius or the Gulf of Mexico. One wrong move and Crete goes from energy hub to eco-disaster with a Netflix documentary. And there's also the whole thing of, dealing with American oil companies. Maybe not the most ethical companies in the world, but that's the price to pay these days with having any sort of oil project. However, just with this project alone, Greece might actually pull off a once-in-a-century economic pivot. From a country known for being bailed out to one known for bailing out Europe, at least bailing them out of winter blackouts and high oil prices. So let's just say you've leased half of the Mediterranean to Chevron, you've told the EU, hey, we might actually have more gas than spaghetti, and now you're wondering, how do I get all this potential natural gas to market? You can't exactly send it via airmail unless you enjoy the idea of flaming seagulls and lawsuits from Brussels. Well, that is where the East Med pipeline comes in, the Godzilla-sized infrastructure project that's been described as everything from Europe's best hope for energy security to a glorified underwater paperweight. So the East Med pipeline, if you haven't heard of this, it is, or was, or still might be, a proposed 1,900 kilometer natural gas pipeline that would run from Israel's Leviathan gas field through Cyprus, Crete, and mainland Greece, then connect to Italy and Western Europe via the Poseidon pipeline. Think of it as a really long straw, except it costs $7 billion, and nobody's sure who's holding the other end at this current second. Now, if completed, it would have the capacity to carry 10 billion cubic meters of gas per year, enough to power a few European countries and, with luck, prevent another German press conference where the Chancellor explains why everyone has to wear 3 sweaters this winter. Now, this pipeline wouldn't just help Israel, Cyprus, and Greece. It wouldn't just export their gas, it would also completely bypass Turkey. So Turkey would be cut out of the regional energy money circle like it was Greece at the Eurogroup financial meetings in the early 2010s. So let's start off with the big picture for this pipeline here. It's not just about gas, it's about power, sovereignty, and Europe not freezing every February because it's too scared to upset Putin. Ever since Russia went full Bond villain and invaded Ukraine, Europe has been in an energy crisis mode. It suddenly realized, hey, maybe depending on the world's angriest shirtless horseman for our gas wasn't such a good idea, you know? So now every EU country is scrambling for alternatives like panicked college students 5 minutes before a term paper is due. And Greece, for once, is in the right place at the right time. The East Med pipeline would make Greece a transit hub for gas flowing from the Middle East to Europe. It would make Greece a geostrategic player, not just a warm beach with defaulted bonds. And it would make Greece an exporter, not just of yogurt and tax evasion and really good food, but of energy security. Even Ursula von der Leyen, who normally speaks in PowerPoint bullet points, said in 2022 that pipelines from the East Med are part of the EU's plan to diversify gas imports. So that brings up the question, if this idea has been around for years, over a decade, why hasn't it been built? So yeah, about that. At roughly $7 billion, the East Med pipeline, it's pretty expensive. It's so long and deep, that's what she said, that if it were a Tinder profile, it would be accused of trying too hard. Laying pipe across the Mediterranean's tectonic, seismically unstable, politically hostile seafloor is basically the Avatar 2 of infrastructure, so it's complicated, it's underwater, and it'll probably be 3 years too late. Also in 2022, the Biden administration quietly backed out of its diplomatic support for the East Med pipeline. They claimed it was too complicated, not green enough, and not inclusive of all regional actors, which is diplomatic speak for Turkey's mad and we're tired. This was widely seen as a bone toss to Turkey, whose government had been furious about the project because, well, it bypasses them completely. For Ankara, East Med is basically a party they weren't invited to, but for Greece and Cyprus, Turkey's exclusion is the entire point of the pipeline. It's not just a pipe, it's a pipe with a middle finger welded into the valve that says, "Goodbye, Turks, goodbye." Now, as of 2025, the pipeline is not dead, but it's also not exactly alive. It's kind of in limbo. I like to equate this pipeline project to one we had in Canada out west, which was essentially kind of semi-approved in like 2015, but really opened last year. They waited till the time was right to actually build the pipeline. And I think that's what will happen here. And also, just of a side note, Energean, which is also a really great name for a company coming out of Greece for Aegean, Energean, one of the region's biggest gas developers, still supports this. So does the Greek government. And, well, so does common sense for the most part, if you're trying to make Greece more than just the world's most photogenic retirement plan. But now, lastly here, I know what you're probably thinking. I heard that Greece was like a really green energy economy and that they were trying to do away with all the messy oil stuff and all the gas stuff. And well, they are doing both right now, actually. You see, Greece has had a full renewable energy glow up in the past decade. Especially in the last few years, Greece has gone from, hey, maybe we should try renewables, to how fast can we cover every available rooftop in solar panels before Brussels runs out of subsidies? In 2023, Greece officially became a net exporter of energy, as mentioned earlier, and it was the first time in modern history that happened. However, this was largely thanks to its renewable energy sector. Think about that. The country that used to rely on importing fossil fuels like they were a euro meat is now sending energy across borders like a proud Mediterranean Elon Musk. So here's how it happened. From 2019 to 2024, Greece doubled its solar capacity. Wind power surged in northern Greece despite angry farmers who think turbines scare off goats. Islands like Tilos, Astypalia, and Chalki became testbeds for 100% renewable microgrids because nothing says energy innovation like a tiny Greek island full of retirees and EU-funded Tesla batteries. Now, the result of this was over 50% of Greece's electricity came from renewables in 2024, beating the EU average and making Germany, yes, smug, lecturing Germany, briefly jealous. Even Greece's conservative government has realized there's political capital in solar panels that don't require offshore drilling permits or angry letters from Greenpeace. So this brings up the question. What is the outlook for Greece and its power going into the future? Well, some are saying that Greece right now is becoming the next version of Norway. It's being fiscally responsible, it's having a lot of budget surpluses, it's becoming an energy powerhouse. Real wages are now finally surpassing things like inflation and the cost of living increases, which is still quite rare today in Europe. There's a lot of similarities. And so, depending on what's found in the Greek oil fields offshore, and over the next year, depending on what discoveries are made or are not made, we could see articles coming out about how Greece might not just be the next Norway, but it could be the next Saudi Arabia of oil, depending on how much they find. Now, with a little more luck, fewer bureaucratic delays, and some well-timed EU climate grants, Greece might just pull all of this off. And that's pretty crazy, considering just about a decade ago, Greece was the sick man of Europe, and now it might be the lifeline of Europe. But anyways, check out my YouTube Creator Academy if you want to find out how I make my videos and how to grow your YouTube channel. Also click on my documentaries playlist to see more videos just like this. So click on that. I'll see you guys in my next video in a few seconds. Bye-bye.